Hello everyone, welcome to this weekly update on today, Monday the 5th of February. And well, I guess it wouldn't be a weekly update without some TFM news. So the news this week, as released today on the latest blog post, is that TFM has scrapped their previously discussed concept for add-on modules and is now going to switch to a software for service model. And this is what they say on their blog post. So I've tried my best to simplify it. There was a lot of jargon in there, but there's only so much I can simplify it. So TFM will transition essentially to a software for service subscription model. Let's have a look at the reasons for this change then, shall we? So after consulting with a licensed attorney, it was determined that the GPL3 license conflicts with the plans for paid add-ons due to its requirements for software interfacing with proprietary licensed plugins. Did you understand any of that? Yeah, me neither on the first read anyway. So they're saying that they have some concerns about licensing these paid add-on modules. Closed source plugins required for paid add-ons pose a security risk by potentially opening doors to hackers and viruses, especially since they contain license validation mechanisms. I think this next point here is probably the key one. But who knows? I mean, the security thing, obviously that's a concern from many perspectives and for many applications. But obviously they've decided for them that it's too much of a concern to go forward with this model. But the next point here also confirms that implementing a paid plugin system would require significant changes to TFM's code base, posing additional security risks. So sounds like they're now determining that maybe there would be some significant changes. I mean, that was probably always going to be the case. It's difficult to know from our perspective how significant. I mean, obviously the idea was that some of TFM's base was going to remain freely available and then new add-on modules would simply go on top. Obviously those modules would have had to been created in such a way that they could sort of act as expansions. They wouldn't have fitted in with the TFM's base automatically, so there would have had to be those mechanisms in place. In the past 3 years, minimal interest has been shown in TFM's development, with limited pull requests and limited use of preview builds compared to official releases. Certainly, I think that's been the case in terms of the pull requests, and significant contributions to TFM do appear to have been limited. Obviously the use of preview builds. I think, people will use the preview builds when they feel that they're up to a standard that they can trust. I mean, I for one tend to use the preview builds provided they're at a certain level. Unfortunately, people only have so much time, and often they want to complete a flight from A to B without significant issue, and especially if they're doing that on VATSIM or Pilot Edge, they probably want to know that their software is going to work and not bug out on them. So there probably is some limitations to previews. Not everyone has time to test and do a flight only to have it ruined by a piece of buggy software that's in preview. But obviously we need people to test it, and so it's always good when people have time to try out the previews. I think probably the previews have been more widely used than the point about contributions to TFM. I think that's certainly correct. There's not been many contributions in terms of support on the GitHub page or submissions of projects that they want included in TFM, you know, because anyone can do that, or could do that, I should say. You could, in theory, build something of your own and then send it off and say, hey, can you look at this and implement it into TFM? But I don't believe that's really ever happened substantially. So they highlight, as we've already discussed, the need for consistent revenue to cover expenses and compensate for the time invested. That's pretty much the same concept as was previous. The move aims to protect the creator's intellectual property as TFM grows. Development will pause as TFM transitions away from open source, but official downloads, this is quite important, and preview builds will remain available temporarily. So you can still go ahead and get these programs for now for free and use them. So, you know, do that, make use of your time. The website will be updated to accommodate paid subscriptions and new news forms and feature requests. So that, you know, there'll be various stuff going on this website, bug reports, contact forms, news, all this kind of stuff. Adjustments will be made to comply with copyright laws, licenses and distribution requirements. Once secure, TFM will move all free builds from the website and implement a subscription validation process for purchasers. Paid subscribers will get access to preview builds. TFM will also offer private beta access to selected applicants. Obviously, there's a lot of information that's not here. They talk about that coming up as we kind of move forward with the process. So obviously we don't know, you know, what an application process would be like, or you know, you would hope that everyone would be put on an equal footing, regardless of their relationships or whatever to individuals in terms of that. You know, but that's not detailed. So, but certainly the preview builds will be available to paid subscribers, and you would assume that yeah, the release versions also. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to make any kind of assessments of this. Obviously, there's been quite a significant U-turn here. I should point out, if you listen to the podcast, you can pretty much scrap most of that, because that was all was now pretty much all factually incorrect. So yeah, that was a good use of time. But what can you do? So, you know, yeah, read the blog post carefully if you want more detail. Look, you know, obviously we're going to have to wait and see how this all pans out. And you know, I mean, I don't think there's any dispute in terms of TFM being payware. I think that's always been a point that I have certainly thought was going to be necessary to keep this project going. And we've seen the stagnation of development over the past months in comparison to previous years, down to mainly the limitations in time of the development team. So you know, obviously payware, I think making TFM some form of payware is going to be necessary. It's obviously unfortunate that you won't have as much choice as a user to sort of diversify what you actually want to look at and what you don't. So you're probably just going to end up with everything lumped in together. How that will work and whether that will then jack up the price of subscriptions, you know, who knows? We'll have to see. We spoke about on that podcast, you know, the importance of reasonable pricing, and, you know, I think obviously the community has a powerful voice in this, not just in terms of feedback, but also in terms of whether it pays for the damn thing or not, right? I mean, the TFM team will figure out whether their pricing strategy is any good when people do or don't pay for it, and that's really where the bread and butter of this policy will take shape. So yeah, that's the news on that, and I think it's just a wait and see job. I don't really have any particular thoughts for or against this, but obviously they've done some consulting and they've found out that you know, in their opinion, and I say that in their opinion because, you know, I'm not particularly well versed in GPL3 licensing or whatever, and as they say here, they've apparently consulted a paid licensed attorney. You know, they're saying that they don't believe that it is a useful way to proceed, and hence the change in policy. But if you know more about it than me, then feel free to leave it in the comments. Let's have a discussion, and you know, if you have thoughts on it, then my mind is very much open. So we'll see what people think about it. I thought I'd put in here some stuff about pmdg, because there is a significant update with regard to the 777 in particular that was released on the 3rd of February. So the 737, firstly, briefly, they do say that an update is in progress and should be released in February, although the exact timeline is uncertain. The 777, they say another beta version is being sent to testers. 541 reports have been opened in terms of bugs, and 432 of those have already been resolved since testing began 6 weeks ago. They talk about testing is in the phase now where the focus can start to shift from bug fixing to considering new feature requests, and the final decisions on what will be included in the release to market version will be made in due course. So obviously this indicates quite a significant progress toward completion. It seems like in the past 6 weeks they've been able to get through a lot of the bug requests, so I would not be surprised if we see the 777 in maybe March. I would think that would be a reasonable estimate. First Officer did release an update as well. I do not have the full changelog here. I can tell you that the button accessibility didn't particularly change. So if you're having the issues with the flow buttons not changing once airborne, that didn't change. I believe the career mode was released though in some form. Whether it's fully complete, I don't know, but that is now released, just to add to the bazillion and one career applications and websites that are already out there for flight sim. So if you want to go and look at that as well, then that is there. I should also add there's been some discussion about First Officer Next, the old version, getting deactivated. I believe the developer has said that this is the case. I believe there is a period of inactivity, about 3 weeks, where if you don't use it, it may get deactivated. You certainly might have issues in the future if you try and activate it. My version is still fine. Everyone I know of using the old version is still fine. People activating the old version is still fine. But, you know, that's not to say I won't change in the coming weeks. Obviously, the bigger thing at play is that, you know, regardless of whether it's working now, as long as it's working for you, that's fine. If you want to keep using it, because, you know, it's some people just don't want the faff of having to deal with a version that is in some ways better but some ways significantly worse, then you can keep using it. But there will come a point, of course, where FSUIPC gets an update, pmdg gets an update, and you have to do these updates at some point, and then the old version will just be busted because it's not interfacing properly. So yeah, that will happen. We will have to move to version 5. Once he fixes the flow issue with the button labeling in the air, it's not too bad. Obviously there is the issue that you know, sure, the flow editor is not particularly user friendly, and it is rather annoying that, you know, you have to make some changes to the flows. You know, especially if you don't want, well, even if you do want, to be honest with you, wanted to do things with your FMC from Simbrief, if you need to make changes to the flows. But if you want to remove that, then you also have to make some changes. So it's a little bit more less of a plug and play thing here, but yeah, it's going to be usable. And some people I know about issues even saving the flows that they created, so there are still some significant issues. So I mean, if your old First Officer Next is working, then, you know, you may as well keep that around as a backup plan. But yeah, well, that's the update for this week, and we will be back with more next week probably. We'll see if there's another big policy change, sea change to come next week. You never know, but yeah, Right. Have a good rest of your week.